This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. On the show, you'll hear from leading Australian business owners as they share the lessons they've learned building their companies. You'll learn from their successes as well as some of the challenges they faced along the way. We also talk to experts from a range of fields who share specialised techniques you can use to improve your business. I'm your host, Savan Tuna, and I'm a director at Alexander Spencer, and I'm really passionate about helping Australian businesses succeed. In a world obsessed with speed, there's something powerful about slowing down, especially when it comes to design. But how do you stay competitive and true to your values when the market demands fast fashion and fleeting trends? Today on The Bottom Line, we're joined by Iris Isaacs, designer and creative director of inSync Design, an award-winning contemporary jewellery brand based in Melbourne. Iris has built a globally recognised label known for its sculptural pieces and distinct identity. In this episode, we explore what makes inSync Design stand out in a crowded market, how Iris scaled internationally while staying true to her craft, and her advice for creatives looking to grow with purpose. Let's dive in. Iris, thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
You've done podcasts before, so you're not new to the game. So I'm really excited to listen to your story and get to know you a little bit more. But, to everyone out there, I am business partners with your husband. So I do know a little about you, but I haven't really asked you too much about your business and your business journey. I've seen it from afar. So love for you to share your story, tell us about yourself, and let's get to know you a little bit more.
So my business is inSync Design. It's contemporary jewellery handmade in Australia, and it's been around for 17 years, almost 18 years now, and primarily was wholesaling and exporting overseas to museums. And it wasn't actually planned that way, but it sort of organically fell into that lane. So the business sort of started on a bit of a whim. I was a jeweller and I used to work with gold and silver and diamonds, traditional sort of jeweller, very contemporary sort of design, very minimalistic, but still very traditional materials and methods. And then at the time, my daughter was 3 years old and there was a call out from Craft Victoria, which is a Victorian body for Victorian makers, and they wanted to establish a design market in Federation Square, and it's something that was never done before. That was 18 years ago, and they wanted to create a very particular design market for local makers that hand make and design unique products for Christmas. So I got that email saying, can you design something specifically for that market? And at the time, of course, my products were very expensive. And my daughter, being 3-year-old, she was obsessed with drawing these circle dot legs and arms. And she was making hundreds of them. And they were colourful and they were very naive and beautiful. And I collected so many of those drawings. And then when the call out came, I was like, I want to do something like that. I wanted it to be really naive and colourful and not expensive, because I was working with very expensive materials and my pieces were very expensive and selling it through really high-end galleries. And then when the call out came, and I thought for a Christmas present, I wanted it to be quite accessible price point, around $100 mark. And I was very inspired by her drawings, and then I just took her crayons and her drawing paper, sat on the floor with her and did lots of drawings. And I was a stay-at-home mum. I didn't really have contact with a lot of adults at the time. So I asked Jeffrey to take my drawings to work and ask for people's opinion, adults' opinion. Not really, considering that it wasn't my target market, because he was working with mainly males in finance, not really in design. And he came home that night and he goes, I'm really sorry, but nobody liked it. And I was like, are you serious? And he goes, I really don't advise that you should go ahead with it. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I really like it. I'm going with it. And he was like, okay. So I designed and made 70 brooches out of stainless steel that were brightly coloured in powder coating and took it to market. And we sold out.
Wow.
And, we took 70 brooches. We made over $20,000 in one weekend. And after that, the NGV contacted us and they wanted to stock the brooches. And I said, sorry, I don't have any. We sold out and I'm back to my normal job of gold and diamonds. So they did something that they would never really normally do. And they said, we'll give you the money in advance to actually create the collection for us. So I was like, okay then. So I created the collection for the NGV, and then soon after, within a few months, we were stocked in all the top museums in all the states in Australia. So it was like the NGV and the Gallery of New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia. So within 6 months, we basically had the top. And it's like, what do you do next? And then I had a partner at the time, and then we decided, you know what? We've maximised the top cream of Australia, let's go overseas. So we decided to go and do a trade show in London. It's called Top Draw. It's a trade show for buyers. And we went to the trade show for the first time really not knowing what to expect. And we didn't have many orders, but we did have two very, very significant contacts. The first one was the buyers from the V&A Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum. So the way that the buyers go about purchasing products for the V&A is that they send 8 buyers to the show, and the buyers basically collect cards of products that they think could be suitable. And a few of the buyers picked up our cards from the V&A and they said to us, look, we like your product, but your chances of being stocked in the V&A are very, very slim because it goes through committees. You need to be selected to the next one and to the next one. And if you do get selected, within 3 months, you'll hear from us. 3 months later, I got an order of 350 pieces.
Wow.
It was like unbelievable.
Amazing.
It was the biggest order I've ever got from a museum, actually.
And it was the Victoria and Albert Museum in London.
I know.
How is that?
But they said to us, look, don't hold your breath. Your chances are very, very slim. And then the order came and it was enormous. And the other contact that we had, I don't know if you're aware, but there's something that's called trend books. So it's a trend forecasting for big companies. So big corporates like Country Road or any of the big corporates, they would have a subscription to trend forecasting. And what it is, it's once a year they produce this book and then they forecast the colours and the shapes and the materials and whatever will be coming in the year after. And our brooches were actually part of the forecasting for the year.
Wow. So this is 17 years ago. This is
18 years ago.
Early stage.
Really early stage.
Wow. So many really early wins that would have really given you some momentum and energy and confidence, right?
Do you know what? I went into it completely naive and not knowing what to expect. It was just fun. I just did it because it was great. It was fun. I never had a business plan. I never really planned what's going to happen. It was just doing what we love and going with the flow and see what happens. So we were featured in this trend book, and then we had an order from the V&A that came a few months later, and then we had one order from a museum in America that came to the London show. And that museum buyer said to me, like, why aren't you showing in America? And it's like, I don't know, because we've just started and we've just done London for the first time. And they go, you really need to consider America. It's like, okay then. So then I went and did the trade show in America, New York now. And my first show was a disaster. I had nothing because I was placed close to Chinese imports, very cheap, and the real museum buyers didn't come to that area. So it was really bad. So then I went and spoke to them and I said, listen, it's just not the right place for me. I need to be around where museum buyers will go. And another thing that I've discovered very early on, again, I didn't have a niche that I was targeting and I didn't have my buyer sort of in mind. I just did what I loved and I thought, it will attract the right person. And what I found really fascinating, that every time that I showed my work, the people that were really attracted were museum buyers.
And that whole museum buyer thing just came because the NGV saw you at that trade show.
Well, no, they saw me at that market.
Yeah, the market, the trade, not the trade, that's what I meant, the market.
Yeah.
So you didn't have museums at all on
Nothing.
the side. And then you're like, okay, museums, you're in across Australia, and even just weirdly, only museum buyers.
Yeah,
were the
not
ones
only. I mean, there are some sort of galleries and whatever, but I find that even today, 18 years later, I will do a show, whether in Australia or overseas, and I'll do my display, and I can tell you a mile away who's going to come and buy it. I can pick my buyers a mile away. Most people wouldn't even look at the work because it's very edgy. It's not mainstream at all. So most people will walk past, not even look at it. But the people that actually recognise it, they would zoom in and they will know exactly what they want.
Is it because it's more
Arty,
arty
yep.
and art as
Yep.
opposed to jewellery?
Correct.
I know jewellery's got an art.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
art, isn't
It's
it?
100%. It's wearable art, and it really attracts people in the art. So my biggest client base, I've got 8,000 collectors worldwide, and I'll get to it in a minute, but my biggest collector base is architects, interior designers, performers, politicians. Politicians really like wearing it on a jacket because it's all very conservative and just one brooch really lifts it up. So I find that really my target audience, again, organically happened, are all creatives.
So take us through that export journey. We'll get straight into it. They said you got to be in America. You went to your first show. And I know from talking to Jeffrey here, you travelled so much. I know Holland, you used to go to Holland quite a bit.
So
and
then,
Asia.
yeah,
Love
I
to know.
started doing trade shows regularly. So then I launched one collection a year. I would launch it in Melbourne. I'll do the trade show in Melbourne. And then straight after that, a week later, I'll be in New York. And then in the end of the year, I'll be in Amsterdam. And for 15 years, that was my cycle. I'd do the design, the manufacturing, and the production for the first 3 months of the year. And then it was a bet because I would produce 20 to 30 designs and I would produce big quantities because the museums buy big quantities, and then have a bet because some pieces really sell well and some don't. So you really don't know. I would produce all of that. Then I will release it in Australia, have all my museum buyers order in Australia. A week later, I'll be in America. They'll do their orders. And then in November, I'll do Amsterdam and I'll repeat the process.
So now you're more global, lots of buyers. Did you change the strategy on pricing? Because you originally went to that market with accessibility in mind. Did it always stay that way? How
Yes,
did you did?
and on purpose. Because my product was selling in museum stores and the target market was people that like arts and museums and whatever, they would go into a museum and at the end of the visit, they'll always go via the shop. And then the idea was that you'll go via the shop, you'll find something that you like, it's not too expensive, it's beautifully made and beautifully packaged. It's a no-brainer. So I really wanted to keep it around the $100 to $200 mark. The prices have crept up over the years, but not massively. I'm still within that price point. I'm still within my lowest price point is $130 and the highest $210. It's still within that parameter and it works really well.
And one of the big themes of your brand is slow design, thoughtful and deliberate approach. And just take us back, unpack what that means and how does that shape your creative and business decisions moving forward?
Well, as a person, I'm very intuitive. As I said, I don't have a business plan. I've never had one. And it's very much intuition. When I design a collection, I would do something like 200 drawings. And out of the 200, I would pick maybe 20, sometimes less. And it's all based on intuition. So I will just draw and draw and draw and draw until something feels right. And then when it feels right, you really hone in on that and you really make it better by composition and thickness of lines and things like that. So you just try and see what works. Sometimes you really can't predict what will be a bestseller and what's not. As I said, I do a collection of 20. At the moment, I'm doing 12 a year because I've moved from wholesale to retail, and I'll explain that later. But when you do that, sometimes when I design it, I have this gut feeling this is going to be an amazing seller, and I'm right. Sometimes I do something and I think, yeah, it's great, but okay. And then it becomes my bestseller. It's like, oh, okay. There's a bit of surprise within it.
And how do you feel the pressure to compete with the fast fashion? Like,
I don't.
You don't?
I
Because you don't
don't.
play in that market? Is that
At
what it is?
all
Yeah.
and on purpose.
Okay.
I can't compete on price. And my product line is very different to mainstream, and I don't appeal to mainstream. So if somebody is looking for price competitiveness and for trend, I'm definitely not. And I actually like that because then I don't need to be fast fashion and there's a very strong integrity to the design. And that leads me to, I've got collectors, I've got 8,000 collectors that have been collecting for 17 years. I've got collectors that have 50 and 60 pieces of my work. And every month I release one new design and every month they buy it.
So tell us about your marketing strategy. So I know that you said that you don't have a plan or a business plan, but there's got to be some thought to who the audience is, or you've definitely talked about that. But just how did that go to market? You've gone down that road of trade shows.
Yeah.
Have you evolved over the 17-year
Oh,
journey? And what
big
have you
time.
learned? I'd like to unpack a little bit about the challenges that you had in getting it to market, and then maybe things didn't work out and you had to pivot. I'd love to know more about how that played out.
So my initial collection was the line collection, which is line drawings translated into stainless steel and then worn as earrings, brooches, necklaces. So the first collection was the brooches, which is very specific for the art world. Like, artists and designers really love wearing brooches. Normal mainstream don't, so it's very much targeted to that, and then later on expanding to necklaces and earrings, which are more mainstream. So that was sort of the starting point. And when I started, it was very much just bright colours. So everybody were really attracted by the bright colours, but they wanted the subdued gold and silver and black, which is normal. So I found that even though people really liked the colour, when they had the option to go for the classic colours, they would buy that. So the first initial attraction was the colour, but then they would go for the safe choices. And over the years, I've actually moved away from the bright colours, and now my collection is gold, silver, black and red, because these are the best sellers. And once every year, I introduce one colour that's a limited edition for my collectors, because they love that. So like last year was pink, because I don't know if you remember, there was the Barbie movie. And I asked my collectors, what colour would you like this year? And unanimously, everybody said Barbie, pink. It's like, okay then. So pink was last year that I did a small collection of brooches, just pink. Next year will be something else. So yeah, but I stick to the collection of the classic colours because they sell really well.
And talk us about your production, because it's handcrafted, handmade. Everything's handcrafted, handmade.
Here in Melbourne, yeah. And when I was selling to museums, and I had 90 of the best museums in the world stocking the work over the years, including MoMA and V&A and all the best ones, it was only 3 of us handmaking everything. We were exporting about 10,000 pieces a year, all handmade.
How did you get through that? Was that a learning in the
Working
art of...
24/7.
Working 24/7?
24/7, yeah. And it was exhausting. It was really hard, but I was living on the adrenaline rush. It was really exciting. Every time you get another order from really amazing museum, it's like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And the other thing that I really focused on was winning awards, winning design awards. So actually, the first award that I got, I never really applied for. It was, do you know Good Day USA?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so Australia markets itself to America, and they chose our brooches as one of the gifts to the Good Day USA. So that was the first leap into it. And then after that, we started applying for design awards internationally. I think the second one was a German design award. And then afterwards, we got lots all around. I've got 16 design awards now. So that's part of the kudos of being stocked in the best museums and having these amazing design awards. It's all part of the story, really, and the kudos that goes with it.
And do you think the consumer values the handcrafted that they
100%.
do? So you've never been tempted to use mass production technology, or?
Well, I mean, I use laser cutting, which is mass production, but there are about 16 processes for each piece. So laser cutting is one of them, and that's a very industrial process. But after that, it's very labour intensive.
All right, well, let's change it up a little bit, because I want to talk about being a mum, and I want to get to the wholesale side and where the business is now, because it's not as much as wholesale as it was in the past. But you had to raise kids, you work from home. And
that is why I did that, because I wanted to raise my kids. So pre-kids, I worked in corporate as a graphic designer. And then once my son was born, I wanted to work from home. And that's when I started having my own graphic design studio, and I studied jewellery as well. So I studied jewellery, sculpture, graphics. So this combines all of it, really. And it was very convenient working from home, having a home studio, and then I can juggle, school runs and pickups and sick kids and whatever. So that was very convenient. But I really juggled massively, and I worked 24/7. I was sleeping about 5 hours a night for about 15 years.
If you could go back 17 years and whisper one little thing, what would you say to her?
I think just pace it. I didn't. I went all in. I think I was so excited by, the reception, and everybody loved the product and being sort of so popular and loving it. I lived on that adrenaline rush all the time, but I really paid for it in my own health. As I say, I slept 5 hours a night for 15 years. It was hard.
So Tal was the inspiration with the
Yeah.
drawing.
She's very proud of that.
As she's gotten older, did you ever get the kids and Jeffrey into the studio filing away?
Oh, no.
But
they do help with the markets. So whenever I do a market here, they help me with the setup. Tal's very good at sales. Jeff, he loves coming with me for interstate shows. So he helps me with the setup and sales. And one of Tal's favourite things was taking credit cards.
I love that. And did you ever get tempted? Because I guess it's your product, your production, your hands that make it. Back to sort of that, not more mass produced, but did you ever consider, look, I need 8 hours sleep. I need more hands on deck. Was that a design that you did in your business model where you said, no, look, I need to be across a lot more of the pieces. It is my brand.
So,
was there any
while I was wholesaling to the 90 museums worldwide, it was 3 of us making. I was less making. I was more designing, doing customer service, all that behind the scene. And then I had 2 girls full-time making. And then in 2018, I had a stroke. And that was a wake-up call because my body just could not cope with the load. It was just too much. And then it was like a realization of, you really have to give. You have to stop something. And I knew that I had to give in on the wholesale because the numbers were really big. So I knew I needed to cut that down. And I've cut a few of the museums that I didn't like dealing with and whatever, but it still was massive. And then the pandemic hit. And it was like, you know what? That's a sign. No more wholesale. I'm moving to online. And then I thought, you know what, I'm doing so well with the museums. I'll just open a website and everything will be great. Crickets. I didn't sell anything, nothing, because I didn't know how to market myself. All I knew was how to design a beautiful website, but I didn't know anything about digital marketing. And then I had to start learning about that. So I did lots of digital marketing courses over the years. And now I would say 80 to 90% of my income is online, and then I still have a very good sort of number of loyal galleries and museums that still order today, but I don't market to them at all. I just basically release, as I said, once a month I release 1 new design, and I send that email to my collectors and to my wholesale customers, and emails come in with orders. I don't put any effort into the wholesale at all. I don't do trade shows anymore. And the loyal stockists keep ordering without any effort whatsoever.
And take us through the journey. Did you get tempted to go and say, oh, this online market is difficult, challenging? Did you get tempted to go back to the wholesale, or you just grinded? I feel like your personality is you're never going to lose. You kept grinding, I feel like. Is that what made you go down that path?
Once pandemic hit and I got a pause, it was like a moment of museums were shut. Nothing was happening. No orders were coming in. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was like, oh my God, I can actually go back to being creative. So then I designed this sculpture that's called Family Portrait. And it was all about reflecting about family because in pandemic, that's all you had, just your family. So I created this sculpture and then I felt like, you know what, I really miss going back to just being an artist, just creating for the sake of creation. And I started enjoying a different lifestyle. I started exercising every morning. I started doing yoga. I started walking and I started focusing on my health, which I haven't done for 15 years. And I really loved it. So no, I did not want to go back, but I'm absolutely adamant that I will make the online as successful as the wholesale. I don't make as much money with online as I do with wholesale simply because of sheer numbers, but I have a life and my profit margins are much better.
And what did you learn when you did your digital marketing
I've done so many of them.
I'd love to know because I know we're of a similar age profile and the digital marketing world is like so new to me because we get a lot of our business through referrals and word of mouth and so on. And we haven't really gone, other than some SEO stuff, we haven't done any paid ads. And it's like, I know when you go to a store that is in the cloud where no one knows where you are, the only way you can be reached is through digital marketing. How was that journey for you? Were you a skeptic? Were you embracing it? What did you learn in that journey?
Well, as you know me, I don't give up. I just keep at it until I get it right. And I've done, I don't know, I'd say 20 different marketing courses, digital marketing courses, and learning different angles of it. And now, after I've done it for quite a few years, I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. So I've got an agency for the last 3 years or so that does my SEO and does my Google ads. I've experimented with Facebook ads for quite a while and with quite a few agencies. And none of them really was very successful. And it's very surprising because my product is very visual. So you would think that Facebook would work. It didn't. It just did not have enough return. Yet Google Ads works beautifully for me, really well. So over the years, I've sort of really kept with the agency doing the SEO and the Google Ads, and I do all the rest. So I do my email marketing, I do my social postings, and that's full time on its own.
The US recently added some tariffs and obviously you have been exporting and tariffs probably would have been a bigger issue for you. Talk us through, what your thoughts are on that and how does that impact inSync design?
Okay, so I will talk specifically on the US because in Europe it's different again. But in the US, every state has their own tax brackets. So it's very different and it's very difficult for someone that comes from the outside to actually know what tax bracket it will be per state. So the way I've done it as a blanket was that whenever they order, I cover the shipping and I cover the insurance, but they have to cover their own
Tariffs
and taxes and whatever. And I found that worked really well. First of all, because I was exporting so much, I had really great rates with DHL and it worked really well. And also my product is quite small and quite light, so it didn't cost me a lot to ship. And I find that the buyers in America want to know their landed price. They don't care how much it costs you. They want to know how much it costs them at the end of it. So I could say to them, okay, and the way I've structured it was because there is a rate difference between the US dollar to the Australian dollar, and it's always been hovering around the 70 cents sort of price point. What I've done is that if something sells in Australia for $100, I would sell it in America for $100 US. And the exchange difference is what will pay for my shipping, my insurance, whatever needed to be in the middle of all that. And that was enough. At the moment, with the tariffs, it makes it a lot harder because it's unpredictable. Even though Australia is quite protected compared to China and Vietnam and all the rest of it, it is still unpredictable and it's very difficult for you to include those in. But I think both parties, the importer and the exporter, are very aware of it. And also, it's very important to note that the markups in Australia versus America versus Europe are very different. So in Australia, if you sell something wholesale for $50, including GST, it will retail for $100, including GST. It's 100% markup. In America, it's around the 2.5. In Europe, it's 3. And you need to keep that in mind.
While the retailers in Australia will be like, why aren't we getting 3
Well,
times?
some retailers, if they import themselves from China or whatever, they mark it up a lot more.
Yeah.
But for Australian made to sell in an Australian shop, the markup is 100%. That's sort of the standard.
And did you ever consider, when you went from wholesale to retail, a bricks and mortar store in between? I know you've done market, so you've been in that bricks and mortar style market, direct to consumer. Did you ever get the itch to go, I'm going to do online, but I do like the connection with people? Did you think about that?
Every now and again, I do raise it, and as soon as I do, I think, nah, I don't want to be tied down. Jeff and I love traveling, so no.
No, that's awesome. And for the entrepreneur that out there, that's maybe the mum, she's got a 3-year-old daughter or a son at home that's has a passion for baking, jewellery or something, what advice would you give them that's thinking about starting a business? What would you say to them? And if you could talk to them right now, what would you say?
A few things. First of all, find a point of difference. That's really important. I think the market is very saturated on everything. I mean, nowadays, to be honest, nobody needs anything in terms of what's available in the shops or whatever. So if you want to launch something, make it different. Make it different in your offering, make it different in the appeal. something that will be memorable. So whether it's customized, whether it's unique product or unique sustainability aspect or whatever it is, but find some aspect of it that's very different to what's available already. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is really structure your day with your child and with your business in a very smart way. So planning is really important. And I think one of the reasons why I've been successful for so long is I'm super organized. So I plan and I structure my days, my weeks, my months accordingly. Talking about marketing, I have a marketing plan for each year, and I plan each month and each week what's going to sort of happen in terms of the launch of the piece and relaunch of pieces and things like that. So being super organized and having a plan on hand really keeps you grounded and keeps you on track, because otherwise it's so easy to just, the kid is sick or you've got play dates or whatever, and then it's so easy to fall off the wagon. Whereas if you've got that list of things that you need to achieve by the end of the week, you'll find an hour here and an hour there to fit them in.
And you're very fortunate to have your husband who's an accountant. That's probably helped you out with the back-end administration from an accounting perspective. But did you find other mentors or other people that helped you? And if you had your time again, are there people or skill sets that you would have loved to have reached out to in that journey that would have helped you?
That's a great question. I'm a people's person, so I love talking to people and meeting people and whatever. And along the way, I've had an amazing amount of people just landing in an ear and advice, and I always listen and I always want to know more. I think the good thing about having Jeff on my side was in terms of costings and budgets and price per piece. So sometimes I would design something that I really like, and then he will go and calculate the costs and whatever, and he would say to me, it has to retail for that price to make it viable. And sometimes I'd have to erase things because they're just not viable.
I just thought of an idea. Do you ever do a one piece, $1,000?
Yeah, I do. I do.
'Cause I was just
I'm
thinking,
actually working on one at the moment. So one of my collectors, she's got something like 60 of my pieces by now. And she sort of reached out to me and she said, I've got 4 big pearls and I want you to design a piece specifically for me. And I've done that over the years quite often. And she goes, these are the 4 pearls that I've had for years in the drawer. I want you to use those. So I'm actually making her a one-off piece, and of course the price will be a lot higher, but it's a one-off just for her. Yeah, absolutely.
it really is art, isn't it? 'Cause
100%, it's wearable art.
Because in that scenario, it's a bit like you're being commissioned to do an art piece, but it's jewellery. And that's awesome. I love that. And tell me about inSync Design in terms of what's next. Are you excited about any new projects or goals that you've got that's going to happen over the next
I think refining my marketing, that has always been, not always, but for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been really my difficult part that I'm constantly trying to get better at. So I really want to hone in on that and get better at marketing. In terms of products, continuing with what I'm doing and launching one piece a month, I've got a few other ideas. Like I've done that sculpture that is now on the website. It's the family portrait one. And now I've got another project that's in the pipeline. It's a leather tray with my drawings on it. So you can put the jewellery on it on a beautiful bench or whatever. So it's an art piece, but it's functional and it's relating to the jewellery.
Wholesale was a big part of your journey, Iris, and I know you've pivoted, but I'd love to know advice around how does that wholesale market work? How do you make it successful from even in Australia and overseas from an export perspective?
So I have to say that I was very lucky starting from wholesale and then going into retail, because I had to structure my price point and my product cost and profitability for wholesale prices. Then when you go to retail, of course, it doubles up, at least doubles up. So I would advise anyone that starts, always base your price point on wholesale and then go to retail. And the reason is because when you go to online, for instance, yes, your profit margin is higher, but you still have a lot of hidden costs like your packaging and your posting and returns and ads and so on. So if you base your price point and your profit margins on wholesale, you can't go wrong. Whereas if you went backwards, you'll often lose. So that's one thing I would say. And the other thing is when you go into wholesale, always consider exclusivity. It's a big thing for retailers. So when you go to a trade show, one of the big things that they would always ask you is like, who's stocking you in my area? You need to know all your stockists, where they are, and when somebody new comes along and they say, I'm in Newcastle, who have you got? You need to be able to say it. You need to know where your customers are. And it's really important to give them exclusivity because you want that loyalty. And I've got stockists that have been stocking me for 18 years, ongoing, non-stop. So in order to honour them and not impinge on their exclusivity, you need to have that in place in your terms and conditions. So for them to retain their exclusivity, they need to order a certain amount per period. Otherwise, you can't keep giving them the exclusivity if they don't order. But that's something respecting them, giving them their territory, but they need to respect you, that you still need to have your income and therefore they need to order a certain amount per period. So that's one thing. The other thing, so as I said, the pricing, structure it. And Jeff and I, when we structured the pricing, it was third. So it's a third for materials, a third for labour, and a third for profit. And that is your base price. You can't go under that because if you don't, your profit disappears. And then anything above that is great. And that's why when I moved from wholesale to online, of course, my profit margin has grown. But by the time you've added into it the free shipping and the ads and everything else, the difference is about 25% extra on e-commerce. But the numbers are less. So it really depends. But, I mean, having less numbers gives me more of a lifestyle. So it's sort of give and take, if you like.
And my last question is sort of going down this new world of AI. With ChatGPT, you can throw a picture in there and it takes your photo, turns it into a caricature. You are an artist. You draw your own thing. It comes out of your brain. What's that going to be like for artists, whether they do printing, sculptures? 3D printing's been around for a long time. So are you going to get disrupted at all, or are you passionate about...
I actually love ChatGPT. I use it regularly. I love it, and I think it's very useful in marketing and very useful in business running. But in terms of art, I think you can really feel when it's AI and when it's done
from the heart,
by hand, from the heart, it's authentic. I'm actually not worried at all.
I love that. Iris, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's awesome to hear your story. I know you well, but I never really got a chance to ask you how inSync Design started and what the future is. You're an inspiration to a lot of women, mums, and I want to say thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line.
Thank you.
This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. This podcast was produced by accountancy firm Alexander Spencer. At Alexander Spencer, we've been helping business owners realise their goals since 1952. And we play a pivotal role in developing, implementing, and supervising the business goals and strategies of our clients. To find out how we can help your business succeed, head to our website, alexanderspencer.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of The Bottom Line, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Savan Tuna, and we'll be back next episode with more tips to help you transform your business. And that's The Bottom Line.